And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid mendacious forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday. I have a ton of stuff to talk about with you this morning. Everything from the national level down to really weird stuff that's happening in the Cowboy State. And it never fails when you think that you've pretty much covered everything. You get up in the morning and there's just a flood of text messages and different pieces that show up in the lamestream media. And I shouldn't complain because that's kind of what keeps us in business around here. Now, one more thing about the new studio that maybe you may have noticed, you may not have noticed, but it would appear that I have yet another silver microphone. And it's true. I have one here and at the home base studio. As it turns out, there are two studios now. And a little bit of history, if you didn't know. I always assumed that Rush Limbaugh had just one golden microphone. I mean, really, how many golden microphones do you need? I guess if your name is Rush Limbaugh, you need more than one. And the reason he had two of them made is for his studio in New York and his studio down in Florida. And, that way you wouldn't have to move microphones around. I got another silver microphone for that very reason, so I wouldn't have to continually move the mic back and forth. Well, my last trip to Dallas, I was in the Blaze Studios, and I walked by Glenn Beck's desk, and his office is right there, right in the middle of everything. So you can see everything in his office. And sitting on his desk was, of course, Rush Limbaugh's microphone. And then I got to walking around because there was some time in between meetings, and I walked out in the lobby, and here is yet another golden microphone that's marked EIB. So he had two of them. And, I had to ask, hey, what's up with the two microphones? And that's the story. So the story with this microphone is I have to have one at home and one here. It's you would be shocked at the amount of work that goes into producing this program, and it's a full-time job, and it's really all you see on a daily basis is the hour-long program and then the podcast. But there's a ton of work that goes into it. I want to begin this morning with a story that we've been following and I think everybody's been following it. But it's this radical Judge Boasberg that issued a nationwide injunction. He's a district court judge. And, so he issues a nationwide injunction saying that Trump has to bring all of those gangbangers back. Imagine that. People who are admittedly part of a criminal organization are not citizens of the United States. So first of all, they broke a law to get into the United States. And while they're here, and weird that we would think that they would follow our laws once they get here, but anyway, they show up and they continually violate the law. And most of them are committing like really, really serious crimes. We're not just talking about just illegal immigration. I mean, it's robbery, murder, and rape, you name it. I mean, make a list of all of the really terrible crimes, and they're all responsible for them. So Trump loads them all up on a plane and sends them to El Salvador, which if you are headed to prison, that's the one place you don't want to go to. It is the world's most notorious prison, and it's also one of the world's most secure prisons. Well, this Boasberg guy, he tells the Trump administration, no, turn the planes around, bring them back. Well, now the Supreme Court has slapped him down, and we begin with, let's see here, the piece is from Just the News. That's John Solomon's news outlet. I think they do a pretty fair job. John Solomon is an investigative reporter, but here's what he says, and I quote, "The Supreme Court decision reversing U.S. District Judge James Boasberg's block on President Trump's deportation of gang members under the Alien Enemies Act sent a stern message to federal judges nationwide that overreach and venue shopping won't be tolerated. The Trump administration has witnessed a record number of temporary restraining orders against its policies, with lower-level federal judges imposing sweeping blocks on executive actions, notably those involving immigration. The Department of Justice has repeatedly urged the Supreme Court to narrow the scope of federal injunctions and to clarify the extent of lower court judges' authority to intervene in executive branch operations. In a 5-4 decision, the justices opted Monday both to overturn Boasberg and also declaring the district court, the D.C. District of Columbia, an inappropriate venue for the case in light of the gang members' detention in Texas. They did, however, assert that the Venezuelans in custody had the right to challenge their deportations. So this is largely what we've been arguing since the very beginning, that a district court judge does not have the jurisdiction over the entire country. And in Wyoming, we only have one judicial district, but other places, other states have multiple districts, and depending on whatever it is that you're suing over, or wherever a federal crime was committed, that's the district court that needs to handle that specific case. It would be similar to, I don't know, committing a crime up in Sheridan, and the prosecutor moving that crime to, say, Park County. That doesn't make any sense, right? The crime was committed in Sheridan. It needs to be prosecuted in Sheridan. It's very similar to the way this is working. The detention of these immigrants is in Texas, and so that case needs to be filed in Texas. Even if that case is at all prosecutable. So anyway, Justice Boasberg, or Judge Boasberg, gets the slap down, and deservedly so. Now, moving to a piece of news from the Cowboy state. This one, wow. So all day yesterday, the Management Council was meeting, and the Management Council is made up of Senate and House leadership, and then they have an at-large member. So you have, on the Senate side, you have, and I'm going to ask our producer Lou to weigh in here, Agent 29, to kind of help with this. But on Management Council, you have the president of the Senate, the vice president of the Senate, the majority floor leader, and then they've got an at-large member. And then on the House side, you have the Speaker of the House, the Speaker pro tem, the majority floor leader, and you also have the Democrats. So there are 5 in there from the House. And all day yesterday, from what I understand, they held a meeting, and it was to discuss interim topics. So from the Wyoming Turkey Vulture, the Wyoming Tribune Eagle, legislative leaders reduce committee meeting days. And I quote, Wyoming's legislative leaders shook up the interim topic process during their meeting on Tuesday by reducing the number of days for interim committees to meet from 6 to 4. Now, usually the interim committees meet for 2 days, 3 times during the summer. So in effect, and I'm going to have to ask our producer to come in here and explain what the decision was, but essentially they took away an entire day's worth of meetings, or entire meeting schedule, I guess.
That's probably saved us millions of dollars.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's what they do is normally during the interim committees will meet, and they'll meet on 3 different weeks, 2 days at a time. So 6 days to work out a list of 4, 5, or 6 topics that have been predetermined and generally approved by Management Council. And it was actually Senator Nethercott, who came out.
I'll have you know her name is Slithers on this program.
We live in different worlds. So, yeah, it happens. So anyway, she made a motion that I actually appreciated, and part of the sentiment seemed to be that those on the other side of the proverbial aisle felt like there had been a great diminishment in the value of committee bills of late, because these newcomers don't understand how we do things, and they just don't have the respect for the process. And it was pointed out aptly, and I think it was Representative John Baer that pointed it out, that there was a monumental shift, at least in the House, in the position about where we come from. And therefore, bills that were created by people that we didn't have a part of weren't as important to us. And at the same time, bills that have been repressed or that we haven't had a chance to do became important. So there was kind of a general consensus by the end of the discussion that the number of the percentage of committee bills, which is usually around 65% or something, that are actually approved and make it into law, now are down around the 50s, would go back up as the committees began to reflect the value of that. So that was kind of a side discussion. But the idea was, we're going to cut 2 of your 6 days out of your interim committee work. You can always go back and ask for more. But as part of a concession, and this part I also appreciated, they said, we're going to let our chairman be chairman. They're going to be allowed some autonomy, some great amount of autonomy, actually, in picking the topics that they want to do. Senator Nethercott was not particularly interested, and frankly, I don't blame her, in sitting there and listening for 6 hours to every topic be caught up and pled for, when pretty much they were all going to be rubber stamped anyway. So I think they did us a favor in streamlining that. I think it'll work better with try to get done what you got to get done in 4 days. Maybe they'll narrow the scope a little bit and just try to focus on a couple things rather than getting too broad. And I think it's a better system the way that it is. Now, there are some committees like appropriations, like corporations, that have pretty high workloads. And there's a chance that we'll have to come back and ask for 1 or 2 days back to try to get done just the things that we have to do. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
All right, but we're kind of glossing over the gigantic chasm of hypocrisy that this meeting elicited, that exposed, rather. That's probably a better word. We have been told for years on end that the work that the committees do is they do some really good work, and how dare you kill a committee bill? This past budget session, I don't remember how many committee bills died on the first day. The number 13 sticks in my head, but all over the Wyoming media, everywhere, how dare those Freedom Caucus conservatives, those evil right-wingers, kill a committee bill? Do you know how much work went into creating those bills? And those were the finest bills we could possibly ever have. Absolutely ridiculous. The reason those bills were killed is because they were crap, and they shouldn't have been in the legislature anyway. And so, there's a reason why they didn't even get introduced, and it's because of the people on the committees. That most of them are made up of a whole bunch of giant liberals. And the truth is, when you had a liberal House and a liberal Senate, they were all liberal chairmen. In the House, there wasn't even a single committee that had more than a couple of conservatives on them. And over in the Senate fared a little bit better last session. They did have some committees like Bo Beitman, when he was still acting like a conservative, was on revenue. Sherry Steinmetz, I think she was on agriculture. So there was a couple of committees that, even though the liberals were in charge and Ogden Driscoll was the president, that we still had some good committees. But the point I want to make here is that for the longest time, we've been told that the committees do amazing work. And now, all of a sudden, when Senator Slithers and her, I don't know what you want to call him, but Bo Beitman are in charge. Now it's a fantastic idea to reduce the amount of time that that the committees have to work. Secondarily, let's talk about the committees in the Senate. Senate President Bo Beitman gave 7 of the 10 committees to liberals. Let's just take one of them, for example. Nancy Case, Senator K.O. Case, is in charge of Senate corporations. All right, he's been on that committee for a really long time, and maybe it makes a little bit of sense. But let me ask you this. Riddle me this, riddle me that. If you give Nancy Case the rope to do whatever he wants, to pick whatever topic that he wants, what bill is going to come out of corporations? It's not going to be a conservative one. In fact, Nancy Case is going to look at that and say, well, they've let me do whatever we want. Here comes ranked choice voting, or even though Medicaid expansion has nothing to do with corporations, I've tried it 17 times before, why not go for number 18? This is the biggest amount of hypocrisy that I have ever heard coming out of Management Council. Now, that's on the Senate side. On the other hand, on the House, it makes perfect sense. Most of the legislating that's been done over in the House didn't happen in committee because the folks that are in charge, the conservatives, never really had any, majority on any committee anyway. So why would they produce a bill in committee? Well, they just haven't been. And it makes perfect sense to reduce the size of government. Now, all of that aside, the hypocrisy, it making sense to conservatives, I'm actually okay with reducing the amount of government. I don't see any reason why, if the committees are going to churn out bills, that we shouldn't reduce the amount of days. But I am absolutely blown away of how hypocritical Slithers and her pals over in the Senate are being. I mean, it is absolutely plain for everybody to see.
I just want to jump in there. I said earlier, you and I live in different worlds, and we really do, because from the outside, it looks one way. From the inside, it looks another way.
Well, as we all know.
Yeah. So when you're in an interim committee, you have pretty much unlimited time for a couple of days to dig into something, to get questions, to take public input. When you're in session and we go through those committees down in the committee rooms there, you're under the gun all the time. You got to be done in an hour. You got to be done in half an hour or whatever. And things are really rushed, and it's hard to give things the adequate time that they may deserve. And so from that perspective, I really do appreciate the work that we do in interims. I think the problem is we've tried to take on too much. We should normally just focus on a couple of principled things and get those ironed out. The makeup of the committees is important. And if you're listening to this, I would encourage you, go look up Corporations Committee on both sides, on the Senate side and the House side. And remember that the leadership of each chamber are the ones that assemble those committees, and they stack committees. They know they can send a bill to here and it'll come back out favorably. And then they have what we also call trash committees, where we're just going to take, that's what they used to do with us. And they kind of did on revenue in the Senate 2 years ago, was they took several conservatives, put them all together, and then just didn't send them any important work. That's, I guess, a little bit of the inside baseball, if I may.
Well, yeah, but I think that the biggest, I think that the biggest point is the narrative that comes out, and it is not just the media; it's people like Slithers and K.O. Case and all the rest of them saying,
"Thank you, Senator, for showing up today."
Oh no, not this. Hold off. Let's go to a break, and then when we come back, we'll hit that soundbite. So go ahead and play the bumper music.
I so wanted to play that.
Oh,
it's going to be hard to hang on to. Here we go.
So anyway, when we come back, a fantastic soundbite, in quotation marks, from Slithers Nethercutt. It's been a while since we've had a doozy from her. We'll do that next.
U.S. Coin Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is being extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson. Welcome back. Now, this isn't just a big week on the program because we have a new studio and, all sorts of bells and whistles and levers to play with. We do have all of those. And frankly, if you've been watching the program, in my not so humble opinion, it looks far better than anything you're seeing from any podcast coming out or, what the Cowboy calls their morning show, whatever. Ours is definitely better. But we've also got some great interviews that we've already done this week that we're going to play during the program. And the first one,
Mr. Starr,
what?
You're going to disappoint me if you don't play that soundbite that we
are going to there, Lou.
I was afraid you were going to an interview.
No, I'm not.
Okay, forgive me for getting in the way.
Yeah, don't stop getting in the way, Lou.
Oh, hush.
Grouch. Anyway, so we did an interview with Representative Harriet Hageman, and I want to just play just a minute or two of it. And we're going to play the whole thing for you tomorrow on the podcast. But here is just in a minute. And
First
let's
of
go
all,
to it.
the Constitution only provides for the Supreme Court, and then it's up to Congress to create such other courts as are necessary. And that's what we've done. And there are 660 plus district court judges across the United States. And what they are supposed to do is decide cases that are in front of them, the cases or controversies that are brought in their courts. And jurisdiction is typically limited to the individuals that are in front of their courts. So, a plaintiff and a defendant, that's who they have jurisdiction over.
All right. So anyway, that's just a little piece of the interview we did with Representative Hageman. And you'll notice there's still a little bit of a delay. I'll have that all fixed tomorrow. And, when you have new toys, you got to figure out how to work them right. And we're working on it. So just pardon our dust. But tomorrow, the interview with United States Representative Harriet Hageman. And it's I'm telling you, it's fantastic. I really like how it turned out. I'm very, very pleased. We did some good work putting this all together. All right. So before the break, we were talking about the interim committee work with Management Council. Well, the Senate leadership was also in Cheyenne. I think it was on the 7th, and it was a little town hall that they put together. And it was Senator Slithers, Benedict Bo Beitman, and Tim Salazar was there. And a question was asked of Slithers about a bill that was created at the last minute. And I talked about this on the program at length, but it was what I called a zombie bill. And let me just set this up for you. So the House of Representatives a couple of times killed the shooting sports complex bill. And it started out as a part of the budget, and then it was an amendment, then it was a bill, then it was an amendment. I don't know how many times they went after it, but they killed it. And then the Senate, at the very last minute, they decided that they were going to have an entire bill created. They had the bill written, they had it numbered, they advanced it all the way through committee, so they didn't even have a committee meeting. They advanced to third reading all on one day, which we've heard for a really long time from all of these redcoats. You have to respect the process, trust the process. It's the process. I'm sorry your bill died and it was really, really important, but it's the process. Well, what the Senate did is they suspended the rules to advance a bill that they knew if they didn't get out of the Senate chamber, they were going to politically pay for it. And so they suspended the rules. Weird. To advance a bill that was going to benefit them politically. Here is Senator Slithers answering that question as to why they did it. Listen close.
Thank you, Senator, for showing up today. I have a two-part question. One was the last few days of session, you suspended all your rules, passed a law in one day, a bill in one day, and tried to send it to the House. And I would like to know what that bill was for and what was the immediate
pause real quick.
Why did
So the question is, you suspended the rules and you advanced that bill all the way. What does it mean to suspend the rules? Well, every legislative body, every deliberative body, whether it be your city council or your Lions Club or your Eagles Club, whatever, they all follow some sort of procedure. Now, most deliberative bodies follow Robert's rules. Others, the legislature, they follow Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure. But largely, they're all the same. Now, the body, whatever body it is, can vote to do anything that they want. As if you got the votes, you can pretty much do whatever you want. And one of those is to suspend all of the rules that you've set up on how things are supposed to operate to do what you want. And that was the question. So go ahead and hit play.
we have to do that all in one day?
The primary purpose of going through that exercise from the Senate's position was to demonstrate to the House and to the new legislators how to do something pursuant to the rules.
Ah!
So rather than
Wait a minute.
the bill,
So Slithers is saying, and I don't know if you caught it, maybe we could rewind and play it again, but what she is saying is the reason they did that was to show the House how it could be done, to really educate them, to let them know that there's a way to follow the rules, dispense with the, and this is just bizarre logic. So we followed the rules to suspend the rules to do what benefited us politically. And we did all of that just to educate those numbskulls over in the House. Go ahead and play it again so we can listen.
to the House and to the new legislators how to do something pursuant to the rules.
To the rules.
So rather than
Suspending.
amending a bill with a topic that's not germane to the bill's topic, Senate File 40, a number of the other budget amendments that were attempting to be tacked on.
So she brings up Senate File 40. She says, not germane. Now, that's an interesting one because what they're saying is, and at the beginning of the soundbite, she says, we're trying to show the House how to do something that's important, to how to stay within the rules to get to complete what you want done. And she uses the example of Senate File 40. Now, let me just remind you what that was. It was a bill that was going to decrease the amount of petition signers you have to have in order to protest a development. And there was an amendment added to it that would have prevented what are called housing mitigation fees. What that is basically is stealing your money and giving it to affordable housing people. Essentially, that's what it is. That if you want to build something on your property, you have to pay to build something on your property. And we're not talking small fees. We're not talking the $25 at the permit office. In Teton County, we're talking tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's legalized theft. It's absolutely unconstitutional. And it is 100% a private property issue. The issue came up after the legislature had already started. And so to deal with it, an amendment was put on the bill. They used the rules in committee to add the amendment to the bill. It is the exact same thing that Tara Nethercott is saying that they were doing to educate the House, or however Slithers put it. Absolutely ridiculous. Go ahead and play the rest of it.
i.e. student sports complex to an omnibus water bill, not germane, Senate File 40, not germane. Because there are ways that you can do this properly, pursuant to the rules.
By suspending the rules.
It can be done. It just requires getting consensus of the majority in the chamber. If everyone is in agreement.
All right, that's enough. I can't handle her anymore. So there's a way to do things properly if you have the votes, if you have the support. In other words, the rules be damned. You can do whatever you want if you've got enough votes to do it. Absolutely incredible. When we come back, we'll get Mr. Producer's take on this whole thing. But it is again, hypocrisy coming from the legislative leadership in the Senate. They don't really care what's right or wrong so long as they can benefit themselves politically. Back in a minute. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election. Siberia, Nova Scotia. I'm definitely moving to Canada. Straight to hell. Iceland, France. Asia's pretty cool.
And has the past 5 weeks just been more than you could bear? If that's the case, you have come to the right place. All you need to do is call my friend Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never been the freedom like I do. I'm stronger.
Cowboy state politics is only going to continue to expand. The program is only going to get bigger. Right now, you can watch it on YouTube, Facebook, X, on Twitter. Don't forget about the Cowboy State Politics podcast. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. And why shouldn't I be? I'm already documented to be almost always right, 99% of the time. A record that really irritates some of the redcoats. Now, before the break, we were talking about the hypocrisy coming out of the Senate leadership. And that's right. I said it and I'll say it again. Slithers is a big, giant hypocrite. She'll say one thing when it benefits her politically, and she'll say entirely a different thing, the opposite, when it suits her purposes. Now, to get some perspective on this whole, really, we were educating the House. We used the rules to suspend all the rules, to do what we want, and that's what we were educating the House to do. So Agent 29, so did you learn anything on how to completely suspend the rules to do whatever you want?
Rules are only written for the elites, apparently, in their mind.
Evidently, yeah.
Yeah. As I remember, we have some longer serving members in the House who got rather vociferous and taking up a lot of our time and speaking about anything and everything forever, especially history. In fact, I went and asked Harshman, I said at the end of this, how many credit hours of history did I get at the end of this session? But one time we had all just had enough. And so I got up and I called for the previous question, which is, by the rule, using the rules, stopped debate and forced a question on the issue. And the uproar was pretty much unanimous from the uniparty.
Yeah, you don't care about the process at all, even though you use the rules.
The rules matter until they don't.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's the biggest problem with that soundbite we played for you, that, when the rules benefit Slithers and her pals, it's one thing. But when they stand in the way of doing what you want to do and making sure you don't have all of your constituents crawl down your throat because you made a promise, you passed a promise, you told them you were going to fund something, and then you decided, yeah, well, maybe that's not the most conservative thing we could have done, and you figured out that you had to go through with it. That's exactly what happened. But I think the most important part of that is the hypocrisy. That on the one hand, the world is going to come to an end when one person uses the rules the way that they're supposed to be used. But nothing's going to happen when you completely suspend everything, move a bill. And again, this goes back to the committees discussion we were having earlier. The committees are so important. The bill has to be vetted. We have to make sure that we have public testimony. And that's probably the most important part, is that you have to have input from the public if you're going to move legislation. And I realize that the shooting sports complex bill, that's the bill that Slithers was talking about. I realized that it went through the legislature before and it did have public comment, but now we're at a different time, different space, different circumstances, different senators and representatives. So we didn't have, the vetting that is so necessary in committees. So just another example of absolute hypocrisy. And let me give you another example from the national level. So we've been talking a lot about tariffs on the program, that, Trump decided that we're going to, increase some tariffs, and it's because the rest of the world has tariffs on U.S. goods. Well, China has decided to retaliate against Donald Trump's threat of tariffs. And it's in the most creative way that you could possibly imagine. Okay, I can't keep up the pretense anymore. It's from the Babylon Bee. But China has decided to retaliate by putting worse fortunes in cookies. And I quote, as part of an escalating global trade war, the Chinese government announced plans to retaliate against President Donald Trump's tariffs by putting worse fortunes into their cookies. Highly placed sources within the Chinese Communist Party confirmed that production had been ramped up on newer, more disturbing fortunes to place inside cookies to be shipped to thousands of restaurants across the United States. Quote, less than happy outcomes are in your future, said one slip of paper seen by a fortune cookie insider. Other fortunes reportedly created to combat Trump's tariffs include, quote, your basketball team is unlikely to make the playoffs. Or a Mexican mariachi band will soon move in next door. Or full control of Star Wars will soon be given to Ryan Johnson, which were sure to take the trade conflict between the U.S. and China up a notch. Well, the only thing that you can do is make fun of all of this. And, a lot of this is fueled by hyperbolic rhetoric. And, to cut through all the political noise, we just need to make fun of it. For example, I believe this one was from The Hill. Hands off. The New York Times hails leftist protesters, but uses no lefty labels. Now, of course, the New York Times is it is the left-wing rag. It hasn't been the paper of record for a really long time. I mean, it is, if you're on the left and you want to get something out, call the New York Times. That's why Susan Stubbson calls the New York Times. Well, first, that's the only paper that's going to print her crap. That and the cow pie. But, if you're a leftist and you need something published, yeah, go to the Times. And I quote, the New York Times seemed invigorated in its coverage of nationwide hands-off anti-Trump protests on Saturday. The funniest part, the story by a trio of Times reporters had zero ideological labels. No liberal, left-wing, progressive, socialist, none of that. They came out in defense of national parks and small businesses, public education and health care for veterans, abortion rights and fair elections. They marched against tariffs and oligarchs, dark money and fascism, the deportation of legal immigrants and the Department of Government Efficiency. Demonstrators had no shortage of causes as they gathered in towns and cities across the country on Saturday to protest President Trump's agenda. Rallies were planned in all 50 states, and there were some even in no, that's not it. That's the next article. Anyway, the protests were nationwide, even in Wyoming. And I've got a piece here from the Sheridan Compress. We got to find a better name for these people. I mean, they're absolutely insidious.
The difficulty is finding a name we can say.
Yeah, I've got plenty of words for them. It's just none of them are appropriate on the program. But the Sheridan Press put out a piece about these hands-off protests. It's entitled, Sheridanites Rally Against Trump and Musk. And this is a glowing article about all the protesters. But there's no intellectual curiosity by Joseph Badet. There's no him questioning the validity of some of the claims that were made. He doesn't even question if all of the protesters were actually from Sheridan. The truth is, my operatives that went down to that protest said that they didn't run into any more than a handful of people that they actually knew, that most everybody they had never seen in Sheridan. Now, you got to put that in context because Sheridan is a town of, Sheridan County, there's about 30,000 people that live here. So the likelihood that you're going to know everybody is pretty low. But you would think in a crowd of, I don't know, there was probably a couple hundred people there, that you're going to know somebody, that you're going to recognize one of those leftist protesters. Maybe Gabriel Green was down there. Maybe Dana Burns might have been down there. Gail Simmons.
Yeah, I drove by and people, I think Badet said there were like 300 people. Well, I drove by and I put my estimate somewhere around 70 to 100. And the reason I did that was because most of the people were down there. They were looky-loos. They were just looking to see what's going on. They weren't part of the protest. So how do you know who counted what? Anyway,
it's hard.
Blown out of proportion.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this piece from the Sheridan Press, it is absolutely a glowing account of what happened. Let me just read you a couple of those pieces of this drivel. Protesting Sheridanites flooded the heart of downtown Sheridan for a hands-off demonstration. There were more than 1,300 other hands-off rallies across the country on Saturday. Sheridan's attendees had no shortage of causes. Some signs even proclaimed there wasn't enough space to share all of their grievances. Paul Deals agreed. Quote, I've seen a lot of signs out here and say that I don't have enough sign to put down all of my issues, and that's how I feel. I mean, just about everything that's going on with the Trump administration. Obviously a Democrat. Sheridan's attendees hope to defend public lands and public education, veterans, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, among other things. They criticized President Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and the Department of Government Efficiency, newly announced tariffs, oligarchs, and fascism, and on and on and on. And it is so ridiculous, I can't even stand it. The Sheridan Press, Joseph Baudet in particular, has zero intellectual curiosity when it comes to anything on the left. But I guarantee if there was a right-leaning protest, if there were a bunch of conservatives talking about taxes or how much crazy spending the Sheridan City Council or the Sheridan County Commission is doing, well, that would be a bunch of right-wing nut jobs, right-wingers, extremists, and of course, they'd throw the Freedom Caucus in for good measure. Just absolute hypocrisy. More in a minute. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone. Documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. Now, again, my phone is blowing up, and, I just accused the left of not listening and journalists of not listening. Yeah, we know that there's a time lag. We're working on it. Pardon my dust. We will get it figured out. It's just a matter of ironing all these things out. So I realize that there's a little bit of a time lag, but we'll get it fixed up. Just be patient. Now, one of the things that the Sheridan Press and the New York Times and every liberal piece of crap paper is not telling you is the other side of all of this tariff stuff. They're not telling you that many of the people that are talking about how terrible tariffs were absolutely in favor of them before. Play cut 2.
The Chinese have enjoyed a huge trade surplus with the United States, as this chart shows. Every year, it gets larger and larger and larger. Admittedly, some of that trade surplus is due to the rules of free trade. But much of that trade surplus is because the Chinese don't play fair. They don't let our goods into their country. I can tell you company after company in New York who cannot sell goods in China.
All right. I can't
only sell the goods
anymore.
under.
So clearly, back in 2005, Chuck Schumer was all in favor of protective tariffs. Now, 20 years later, when it's not his people that are doing it, it is, well, they're the worst thing that's ever happened, that we're going to create a global trade war, that we're going to destroy the entire economy. Just absolutely ridiculous. So let's see here. I believe this one is from The Hill, and this one is, Scott Besson. He was talking to The Hill, and he said federal layoffs will help fill factory jobs created by Trump's tariffs. I'm going to just read a piece to you. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that the Trump administration is planning to boost U.S. manufacturing employment with policies meant to steer laid-off federal workers into factories. In an interview with Tucker Carlson on Friday, it was published on X, the Treasury Secretary that said he believed that the U.S. had enough workers to fill thousands of manufacturing jobs Trump hopes to create through the steep import tax. Now, read this next part. Throw this up on the screen. This is the one that you kept wanting to put up there earlier. All right. So that will give us, quote, that will give us the labor that we need for new manufacturing. Bessent concluded. Now, he goes on to talk about all the reasons why the reduction in the federal workforce is going to create an overabundance of available employees. Now, before the left freaks out, let's remember that is exactly what the left said during when they were trying to shut down coal mines. Play cut number 6 for me.
Anybody who could go down 300 to 3,000 feet in the mine sure and hell can learn how to program as well.
Oops.
Give me a...
Oops. Uh-oh. What did he say there? Like, if you can go down in a mine, you can learn how to code. Absolutely ridiculous. So it was okay for the Democrats to say, hey, man, you're going to have to get another job. But it's not okay for Republicans to say that, simply because, the rules are different when Republicans are in charge. They always have been. The reality is a lot of these federal jobs should have never been created in the first place. Absolutely. I mean, we have so many duplicative programs, duplicative services, duplicative jobs. And a lot of these people, like I read a piece about, and I can't remember the name of the agency, but it was an agency that was meant to facilitate training or something. And I'm going to have to look this one up for tomorrow. But they literally did nothing except spend your tax dollars on luxury vehicles for themselves, lavish trips, all sorts of stuff to decorate their office. And they absolutely did nothing. And nobody ever questioned why we had that department in the first place. I'll look that up for tomorrow and find out and figure out exactly what that is. But when you look at the breadth and the scope of everything that DOJ has been discovering, it is absolutely breathtaking. We all knew that there was waste, fraud, and abuse in our federal government. We all knew that. I mean, you would a bureaucracy of that size has to have waste, fraud, and abuse. And now that we're eliminating federal jobs, well, you're going to have to go find a job elsewhere. And maybe you can work in a textile factory. I hear that we're trying to increase textile production in the U.S. So why not go work there? And this is a direct result of all of the Democrat spending that's been happening for a really long time. Another topic about these tariffs, and I think that this is turning out exactly how Trump wanted it to turn out. That his threat for tariffs really was a negotiating tactic all the way around. Because when you're China, well, then you've put a 60% tariff on all U.S. goods so that you can get everybody to buy Chinese goods. That's exactly why they did it. Well, the reason why Trump decided to put tariffs on a whole bunch of different countries is to try to balance the trade. So, for example, let's play cut number 3. This is Bessent talking about leverage that's being created.
Larry, I can tell you that there are 50, 60, maybe almost 70 countries now who have approached us. So it's going to be a busy April, May, maybe into June. And Japan is a very important military ally. They're a very important economic ally. And the U.S. has a lot of history with them. So I would expect that Japan's going to get priority just because they came forward very quickly. But it's going to be very busy. And if President Trump, again, gave himself maximum negotiating leverage.
There you go.
And
okay,
just when
good.
he achieved the maximum leverage,
so the question is, and I think I talked about this yesterday on the program, that, do tariffs create a system of free trade? Well, that's kind of assuming that free trade actually exists. Now, in a perfect world, yeah, every country would compete with their own goods, and whichever good was better, you'd sell more of them. And if the thing that you were producing was crappy, well, it would go to the bottom of the pile and nobody would buy it except for the people who really couldn't afford anything else. That's how the free market is supposed to operate. And that's why people like Ronald Reagan were against tariffs, because they were operating under the assumption that the market was free and open. Here's Ronald Reagan talking about tariffs. It's cut number 5.
You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is, first, homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then, while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars.
I mean, it's
The result
Ronaldus Magnus. I get it, and I would love to sit here and listen to him for an hour. But we got other things that we got to talk about. Here's the piece that is not included in what Ronald Reagan said. He was president during a time in which we didn't have things called most favored nation status. We did not have artificially created trade barriers. So he was operating under the assumption that, not the assumption really, I mean, it was kind of a reality, that the marketplace was free and open. It wasn't until Bill Clinton's administration that we created most favored nation status for China and favored their goods over the rest of the marketplace. And we absolutely opened the door to allow China to do whatever they wanted with our economy, to flood our market with Chinese goods at the expense of American goods. And they're still doing that to this day, by the way. But, if we eliminated favored trading status, if we eliminated all these benefits to other countries that we don't give to some others, well, then sure, what Ronald Reagan said would work, because he was operating in an environment that didn't have those trade barriers, those artificial trade barriers. And so where that soundbite came from is the Chinese put it up on Twitter or on X saying, hey, man, you're Ronald Reagan guy. He doesn't like tariffs. You know what else he didn't like? Picking winners and losers, which is what we've been doing for the last 30 years. We've been allowing countries to absolutely run roughshod over the American economy because, we're under the mistaken impression that those countries will treat the U.S. the same way, and they're not. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, we're going to go a little bit over today. There's one more piece that I want to talk about, and I found this article on the Blaze this morning, and I think it's absolutely fascinating because I think it is, not necessarily saying the quiet part out loud, but it is, it is talking about a truth. And the piece is called "The End of the Moderate Democrat." Now, most people would agree, I think most people would agree, that if JFK were alive today, he wouldn't be a Democrat. He would be a conservative Republican. But the Democrat Party has moved so far to the left that they've pretty much abandoned any semblance of moderation. Now, the truth is, I would say maybe even 20 years ago, that Democrats, largely loved the Constitution. They didn't want to see our country destroyed. They didn't want to put in practices that are going to intentionally harm our country. They just believed in things like more government spending and bigger government and more government programs. But when our country was attacked, they would still vote to go to war. They would still vote to increase defense spending. But we're in a time where there are people in power, people elected in Congress, that really do want to harm the United States. People like AOC and Rashida Tlaib and the squad and Nancy Pelosi. She's moved, and she's always been a radical Democrat, but at the very least, early on in her career, she didn't want to destroy the country. But here's what Chris Bedford has to say from the Blaze. Quote, New York City is a microcosm of a long looming battle. An interesting battle is taking shape in New York, pitting the embattled Mayor Eric Adams against disgraced former Governor Andrew Cuomo. Both men maintain D's next to their names. Both men want a part in shaping the future of their party, but the two aren't running in the same primary. Adams is running as an independent. Seen up close, this looks like a simple calculation by a man whose busted up political machine would be overpowered by Cuomo's old allies. Viewed from a distance, however, we see a real shift in the leftward lurch of the Democrat Party and what could be the first major 2025 battle of the party's civil war. This isn't the kind of split that happens when things are healthy. Democrats like Adams were welcome in the party just a few years ago. Think back, I don't know, about 9 years ago. An eternity, I know. Republicans were in a panic. The brash and the crass orange man from Queens was cruising toward victory, while Governor John, I'm the Prince of Light, Kasich, and Senator Ted Cruz fought a desperate running battle to turn the tide. Meanwhile, George W. Bush quietly mused that he might be his party's last president. D.C. chattered on delusionally about how to take the party back in a convention fight, and prominent Republicans quietly looked at a divided Democrat Party for their own future. Back then, men like Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel seemed like the right flank of the New Democrats. In an age of President Barack Obama's culture-shifting Black Messiah ascendancy, his former chief of staff cut a no-nonsense, corporate-friendly, budget-conscious, law and order contrast. Now think about that. Rahm Emanuel, the guy that said, never let a crisis go to waste, is the guy that says, you know what, we really do need to have competition. We do need to have a corporate-friendly, budget-conscious, law and order contrast. We're not that group of people anymore, and certainly not the Democrat Party. I mean, they're advocating for, and Judge Boasberg, how we started the program, is a perfect example of that. That we can, allow criminal gangbangers to run roughshod over the country. You can force the American president to bring them back, even when they absolutely are criminals. The Democrat Party has moved so far to the left that most of the people that are elected really do not understand what the old Democrat Party was. The party that I explained, the party of Tip O'Neill, who ate lunch with President Reagan on, almost on a weekly basis. And even though I absolutely kind of despise a lot of his politics, Alan Simpson. Yeah, I know. Alan Simpson was a lifelong Republican, but that doesn't mean that he voted that way. You can look at a lot of the things that he did. He was very much in the middle and had a lot of allies in the Democrat Party. But we're not dealing with those same people anymore. We are dealing with the party of AOC, of Rashida Tlaib, of the guy that pulled the fire alarm, even though he's not in Congress anymore. And when John Fetterman, the wacko from Pennsylvania, when he is the guy that makes the most sense out of the Democrat Party, that should tell you everything you need to know about them. That, they really aren't the party of, maybe a little bit more government spending or more government services. It's radical leftism, baby. LGBTQ, ZXP, WDS, and every other woke thing that you can come up with. That is the modern Democrat Party. Well, we burned through another busy broadcast hour on the program. We're still working on the studio. We're going to get that little lag fixed. Maybe we'll have it fixed by tomorrow. Lots of stuff to go through. When you got all this equipment laced together, you have a lot of things to track down. Not making excuses. We'll provide a superior product the more we go. But that'll do it for today's installment of the broadcast. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk again tomorrow. Strangle.